Welcome to PRI's Next Round podcast. We have our former Speechwriters All-Star panel with us today. We're going to talk about the presidential debate with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. So we have Lance Izumi, Chief Speechwriter to Governor Duke Deukmejian and Attorney General Ed Meese, Tim Anaya, Speechwriter to Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger and other top legislators. And I'm Rowena Itchon. I'm COO, and I was a speechwriter to Governor Pete Wilson, as well as a research assistant in President Reagan's speechwriting team at the White House. So let's open up, guys, with who won the night. I'm going to stick out my neck first, and I'm going to say Kamala Harris. Lance?
Yes, I would say that you'd have to give her the nod. I think it was really more if it were a boxing match, she would have won on points. There wasn't a knockout, there wasn't a TKO. But I think that at the end of the night, the judges would have given her the match based on points. But when we can delve a little deeper into her speech and the reason why it wasn't a knockout and it was merely just a win on points. But what do you think, Tim?
I would disagree with Lance. I think she did knock him out. She won hands down. She made herself rhetorically, and again, we'll quibble on her policy answers, but she seemed more presidential on the stage than her opponent, who was a former president. So I think overall, she cleared a major hurdle on the path to the presidency. Now, we'll see, of course, how many people watched. How does this impact her standing in the polls? I think there's no doubt she'll gain. But she turned in a very impressive performance that was very helpful to her quest to becoming president.
So let's begin with a discussion on the overall performance, starting with Harris. Vice President Harris has only given one interview and hasn't said much about her policy positions outside of a proposal about price fixing the food we buy at the grocery stores and this $25K credit for first-time home buyers. So and of course the flip-flop on fracking, and there were some policy changes announced by some of her aides. So how did Harris fare when it came to her policy stances? So I can go first. As far as policy, in my opinion, that was the weakest part of her performance last night. She made all kinds of dodgy policy statements, like this is, in my opinion, the worst. She said, as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone, in any war zone around the world. Now, this is just a travesty. You've got to be kidding. Our troops are in Iraq, in Syria, suffering all kinds of injuries all just last month. That in itself should be a signal to the voter that she doesn't know her stuff. If she can't say that troops are fighting in combat areas around the world, then I don't know what she's been doing the last 3.5 years. And of course, she made some airy-fairy statements about creating opportunity for Americans, an entrepreneurship society, all designed to pick up moderates, in my opinion. She hit hard on abortion, probably her biggest moment when it comes to policy, but Trump's, unfortunately, his comeback was so disjointed. The fact is, hopefully voters will recognize this, that her predecessors, Obama and Biden, ran on a so-called opportunity agenda, but they tossed that agenda out once they got elected into office, and it became a top-down government control all the way. Harris is far more progressive than Obama and Biden, so I shudder what a Harris administration could potentially do. Lance?
I thought that she was able to deliver her remarks well. But, I don't think that it's as good as some of the commentators were saying afterwards. To me, a lot of it just sounded like the chopped up versions of her Democratic National Convention speech, and that she was repeating those lines. I thought that while her delivery, I thought, was good, my feeling is that what Harris had to do was to overcome people's view that things are difficult for them right now. I mean, is it how is she going to make it better for them when they go to the grocery store and buy their week's groceries and see that the tab that they're paying for right now seems 10, 20, 30% higher than just a few years ago, and they're having a rough time making things meet. She has to overcome that reality for people. And I don't think she really did that. She said that she had plans all through the night. She didn't explain them in much depth. Um, she dodged questions, as Ro mentioned, and others have. And I thought that the questions she dodged were actually some of the really key questions, like when she was first asked whether people are better off today than they were 4 years ago. She totally dodged that question. That's a very key and important point. If you're going to convince a person who's having trouble making ends meet, you got to be able to answer that question, and you can't dodge it no matter how well you deliver whatever answer you have ready. So she dodged that question. She dodged questions on inflation, on keeping President Trump's tariffs on China. She dodged questions on whether she would have done something different on the border from in 3 years, 3.5 years ago. She dodged a lot of her flip-flops, and she dodged the whole question about what she would do to resolve the stalemate in Gaza. So, I think that again, those sorts of important, critical questions that she dodged, I think that people will realize that they weren't getting the answers to some of the key questions that they wanted when they heard the candidates. And especially with her, since she's such an unknown quantity for a lot of people. So I think that she repeated a lot of the old debunked charges against Trump. She stressed unity, said that we can't be negative, and yet she spent a good chunk of the night being negative herself and bringing up charges like that Trump said that there were fine people on both sides of at the Charlottesville riots, and when even fact-checking organizations like Snopes have said that that is untrue. And so she said that Trump would terminate the Constitution, which is, untrue. Again, if she was going to be the unifying candidate, if she was going to be the positive candidate, she needed to, step back from the rhetoric of her DNC speech and, present that type of unifying personality at this debate. And I don't think she did. I thought she was, very partisan and just as heated in her rhetoric against Trump as he was against her. So again, I think that she did win on points, but I don't think that it was a knockout. Tim, what do you think?
Well, I think from the moment she walked on the stage and forced that handshake with Donald Trump, who clearly didn't want to shake her hand, she was in command of that debate. She was poised, she was polished, she was prepared for every potential outcome. She anticipated the tough questions and she had something ready to say. This wasn't the caricature, right, of cackling Kamala or comrade Kamala. Now, that being said, I don't think she did a good enough job in her answers on certainly the policy questions and the flip-flops. I don't think she did enough there, persuading people over to her side. She dodged a lot of questions about specifics. She didn't really have much to answer for the flip-flops. And kind of as a step back, voters do deserve full and complete answers on these many issues. She relied on, an old communicator's trick, and I think it's very effective as we saw on the stage. You can ask a question about whatever you want, but I, as the speaker, am gonna use that opportunity to say whatever I want. Yes, she may have lost points if we were having this debate in the Cambridge Union, but I think it largely won her points with who matters, which are the swing voters who will decide the election. I thought she also was very good when she talked about issues like healthcare or foreign policy or the economy. She talked about it in terms of values and American values like freedom and opportunity. When she made her points, she looked into the camera and addressed who matters, the voters at home, not the TV moderators. And I think the other thing, that she did very effectively, she knew what to say to knock her opponent off his stride, and she did so very strongly throughout the debate.
So now let's talk about Donald Trump's overall performance. Donald Trump did well in his first debate against Joe Biden, but that performance was obviously overshadowed by Biden's horrific performance that ultimately forced him from the race. So it was a whole different calculus for him in debating Kamala Harris. How well do you think he did with his new opponent? I think he gave a really horrific performance, I'm sorry to say. So let's talk about policy first, which, if he had stuck to it, he already had a winning hand. But in explaining his policies, he was disjointed. It's hard to follow for me. And, we're in the think tank business here. I had to kind of discern for a few moments what he was talking about because he seemed to leave out the subject matter. He said Keystone and XL without even telling Americans they were pipelines. This, by the way, I've seen this before in elderly people. They bring up an issue and forget to put it into some kind of context. So from abortion to XL and everything in between, he just looked a bit unhinged. And if he loses this election, it's got to be from that ridiculous line about migrants eating dogs. So I would say that, but even with the migrants eating dogs, he did have the most memorable lines in the debate. For example, what was Kamala doing for the last 3.5 years? Taking a bullet, and that the Democrats were a threat to democracy, that the administration should have fired people. And of course, his line, run, spot, run on her economic plan. He had a strong finish, but he had missed many, many opportunities to really discuss policy. And worse, he fell into the trap every time Kamala needled him. It just set him off spiraling. Trump was Trump, and it is what it is. Lance.
Yes, I agree with you on that, Roe. I mean, President Trump could done much better in his performance last night. I think one of the things that he felt the need to do, that in the end, overall, when you look back on it, that he didn't need to do, or certainly didn't need to do as much, was to rebut all the accusations she would make against him. Yes, she would, say things that would, upset him because, he felt that they were wrong, they were falsehoods. And of course, we know that the ABC moderators were not fact checking her in real time like they were fact checking him in real time. So there was that, but he spent a good chunk of his time allotted to him rebutting her arguments or her accusations instead of using that time to present his vision, his policies, and his and really expounding at greater length on his track record. I mean, Rowena mentioned that he didn't put in context for some of the remarks that he made or the comments that he made, and part of that may have been because the amount of time allotted to him shrank because he spent time trying to rebut accusations from her. So he would have been better served if he had spent that time kind of giving a broader view of his positions rather than addressing her needling of him. I thought that he was effective, in criticizing the Biden-Harris administration on immigration. I thought he was good on Afghanistan. I thought it was a good line. You talked about good lines, Ro. I thought that one of his good lines was when he said to Vice President Harris, "Well, you fired no one. When it came to Afghanistan, you didn't fire anyone. It was a disaster, and you kept everybody in place." And which is absolutely true. Nobody was fired. No one was held accountable, and no one was given the responsibility or that they should have had in order to own up to the disaster. And so I thought he was accurate there, and he was effective, and I thought that last conclusion, though, he did have a good line, like you said, Ro, that what have you been doing the last 3.5 years? I thought that was a good and memorable line, but I think that it was only half of the story that he should have told. He should have said, then, what have you been doing for 3.5 years? And then laid out a positive conclusion and message for the country. He needed I think what he needed was a Ronald Reagan-esque shining city on a hill moment. And he unfortunately did not deliver that. And I think you talked about missed opportunities, Earl. I think that was a missed opportunity for him. Tim, what do you think?
Well, I think there's no sugarcoating it. Kamala Harris kicked his butt, and it was a complete disaster for him. It was really Trump at his worst, rambling, incoherent, and unhinged. It was uttering wild conspiracy theories, as Roe mentioned, about people eating cats. There were the taunts about the rally crowd sizes. And then he went back to the crazy old lies about him winning the 2020 election. And all of that is a major turnoff with swing voters. He didn't prepare for the debate. And it showed. There were many opportunities where he could have prosecuted her record and tied her to the unpopularity of Biden and Biden-Harris administration policies. And he just about failed at every turn. Just look at his word salad answers on abortion and IVF. They were very hard to follow. And I think they probably satisfied no one who cares about that issue on either side. Lance, you're right. He had a great opportunity to show off his administration's many significant accomplishments, to show what he would do for the middle class in a second Trump administration. And it's like he forgot everything he did. I didn't hear it, but I don't think he even brought up that old litany he used to bring up everywhere in 2020 about great Black and Hispanic unemployment and employment numbers and wage numbers. He kept lashing out against Biden, and while it's certainly fair to prosecute the record of their joint administration, it kind of came across as he was spending too much time on old Joe rather than her. Prosecute what she did. Joe's gone. So I would say he looked a little beat up on the stage. He looked worn out. He didn't know where to look while she was speaking. He certainly didn't look her in the eye. And I don't know if that's he just didn't know what to do, or he didn't want to show her that respect, or what. But, I just thought it was a total wipeout of Trump. And really, he has no one to blame but himself. Join PRI on Saturday, September 21st at the Four Seasons Hotel Silicon Valley in East Palo Alto for our annual Sir Anthony Fisher Dinner, featuring this year's keynote speaker and Toby Family Freedom Prize recipient, Kimberly Strassel. You read her Potomac Watch column every week in the Wall Street Journal. You see her on TV in her regular appearances on Fox News Channel. And you read her best-selling books like The Biden Malaise. Now, come see her in person at a terrific evening supporting PRI. She'll discuss the 2024 election, what's going on in our nation's capital today, and the fundamental importance of civil liberties. Visit pacificresearch.org/events today to buy your tickets. While you're there, you can learn about sponsorship opportunities. We hope to see you on Saturday, September 21st. Tickets are selling fast, so visit pacificresearch.org/events today to secure your spot.
So age and scandal were big factors in the first presidential debate, where you had the two oldest candidates in history and on the stage. It was a different factor in the second debate, with a much younger Kamala Harris now going after Donald Trump, who is suddenly the older presidential nominee in his oldest presidential nominee in history. And Vice President Harris' strategy was to act like a prosecutor in discussing the Trump's legal challenges. So do you think age and scandal played out in this debate? Was any candidate helped or hurt by the discussion here? So I can go first. Perhaps I'm wrong here, but I don't think January 6th or all of Trump's various legal issues are all that big of a deal to swing voters. But Trump fell into Harris's trap and raged about them. He should have pivoted and brought up Harris's record on crime, the weaponized Justice Department, going after parents of kids who were concerned about their education, strong Christians on suspicion by the FBI. He could have said lots of things. In terms of age, while Biden looked lost, slow, and confused, Trump seemed manic and could barely make a steady, cohesive argument. So I think Kamala Harris redeemed herself tonight. We talked about this earlier. We've always heard about her incoherent, goofy comments. She wasn't that way tonight. She's a prosecutor and did her homework. In the opening, she was a bit weak, I'd have to say, sort of looking into space to try to remember her lines. But she got stronger and stronger as the evening progressed. I think she really helped herself and put some fears away by swing voters who weren't sure that she was presidential enough or smart enough. Lance?
Yeah, I think that we knew that Kamala Harris was going to bring up the various charges against Trump and about the convictions and all the things that are still hanging out there. I did think though that Trump parried that well when he went into his discussion about it being an unprecedented lawfare strategy against the political opponent, especially with the connection with just the Justice Department. And so I thought that it was going to be interesting how that issue was going to be played out. I don't think that that ended up causing people to change their minds one way or the other. I mean, because all that lawfare, all those charges, all those court cases, they've been playing out for months and months now. And before the debate, Trump was ahead by 1 point in the New York Times poll. So if that was going to make a difference to people, it would have made a difference by now. And I think too, Ro, that you're right, that I don't think that the January 6th, regardless of what one thinks about what happened there, I mean, I don't think that that is going to be the issue that is going to be changing even swing voters' minds. I mean, I really do think that it's going to be how they view each of the candidates on the bread and butter issues, and whether they thought that one candidate or the other in this debate addressed those issues better than the other, and not on these scandal related issues. Tim, what do you think?
Well, I don't think he looked old per se, but I would say that as the butt kicking continued, Trump did look worn out and a little dejected to me. He allowed his opponent to get into his head and it showed. I think another thing, he's used to dominating any setting, and he didn't last night. And to me, it was obvious he didn't know what to do about it. He didn't know where to look. He didn't know how to respond. All the flustered answers. I thought all the points about his legal convictions, the other legal cases, things like January 6th, those are fair points and fair questions to bring up. I thought the way she handled them, she wasn't over the top. You could really browbeat on those issues. I didn't think she was over the top. I thought she looked tough and on point rhetorically. And Trump didn't really have anything good to say about these things. And, a character is important in choosing the next president. He's dealing with a lot of legal issues, right? You'd think he'd have some good answer for all of these things. And these were all points that everybody knew was going to be brought up. He just looked like a child who's caught. And essentially his answer for everything was, I know you are, but what am I? And I think he should be thankful, those same moderators, a lot of his folks are quick to criticize. He should be thankful they kind of moved the discussion along and we didn't dwell on these things over and over again like we might have.
Next, let's grade the candidates in how well they made their case on the most important issues facing voters today. Both candidates actually have pluses or minuses on these issues. Did they help or hurt themselves with what they had to say on stage? So first, how do you grade their responses on the economy, cost of living, and inflation? Well, I would give Harris an F. She barely addressed these issues, and I hand some of the responsibility over to the moderators. I know we'll talk about them a little bit later, but they failed to follow up on her answers and to pin her down. Trump, not much better. I'd give him a D. He had that memorable line about Harris's plan, run, spot, run. But the focal point of his argument was that Wharton professors, and he went to Wharton, said his plan was brilliant. Problem with that is that there are Harvard professors supporting Biden and Harris's economic plan. He did discuss his past record, but he should be able to tick off again and again what makes for a great economy, reducing red tape, lowering taxes, getting government out of the way. Instead, he boasted about all the tariffs he's going to institute. You just want to throw your hands up. Lance, what do you think?
I can't believe that I'm actually giving Kamala Harris a higher grade than you are, Ro. I'm actually, so you gave her an F. I'm giving her a D, and being generous. I really, as I mentioned in a previous answer, I really thought that she dodged a lot of the tough questions on the economy. Said that she had plans, didn't really go into them very deeply. And I think that, again, there's a lot, unfortunately, for the Biden-Harris administration, which they want to, avoid talking about, especially inflation. And so therefore, it's unsurprising that she would dodge it. But because she did, you'd have to give her a low grade for not addressing something that is so meaningful to the American people and is indeed the number one concern of people in when they're asked, what their decisions are going to be based on come the election. And so I give her a D. Trump, I give him a C. I thought he could do a lot better. He has a good record, in his 4 years as president. I thought that he needed to do better expounding on that and being able to lay out then how that 4 year record will then be a trajectory into his next 4 years, assuming he becomes president in November. Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, I would give Kamala a D. I thought that she had good rhetoric about lowering prices, and I thought the language she used about creating an opportunity economy, that was very good rhetorically. But she had no details. But as we've said, she got off the hook because neither Trump nor the moderators really pressed her on these issues. So, in effect, she delivered a rehearsed line and got away with it. I thought, and we mentioned it earlier when Trump brought up at the end of the debate, why haven't you done anything about this over the past 3.5 years? That should have been the start of the debate, and he framed his whole prosecution of her record around that. And really, he had nothing substantive to say about her plans or her record other than calling her a Marxist. And I think that this was a lot of low-hanging fruit. There's a lot that anyone could challenge her about on the economy and bad policy ideas. He completely failed to defend his own administration's very good record on taxes and earnings and jobs and all those things. So that was a really lost opportunity on his part. And the bit about healthcare too. You really have no policy after all these years? I mean, when I was watching it, I yelled at the TV and I said, take Sally Pipes' book and make it into a bill. There's your plan. I would give him probably a D minus on this as well. Both candidates really failed in the discussion of these issues.
So let's go with immigration, the 800-pound gorilla. Kamala Harris has really struggled here. So who came across rhetorically as a candidate who would more effectively deal with a border crisis? Well, for me, I mean, Kamala Harris fell back in her old line about being a prosecutor, protecting innocents, prosecuting drug dealers, criminals. This should have been a slam dunk for Trump, but he had to make the border debate ridiculous with his goofy comment about their eating dogs. Another point I would be concerned about is that he seems to be saying that all immigrants are rapists, murderers, and drug dealers, all those crossing the border. Well, some are, perhaps many are, but he should have also turned that around and make his best argument on what the Biden administration has done to lose control of the border, which has allowed these crimes to happen. Lance.
Okay, I give Kamala Harris a D on immigration. It's just a bad issue for them. She tried to defend herself and by focusing on that bill in Congress that they have supported that would have put some more resources at the border, but really would have allowed still a lot of illegal immigrants into this country. And so, she tried to hang her hat really just on that and on the fact that she had experience as a prosecutor. But again, there were a lot of failures in immigration going on for the 3.5 years before that bill was even proposed in Congress. So, how can you therefore just use that as your shield to then say that, we're going to be tough on immigration. And so, I just think that there was very little that she could really say about that. I think for Trump, I give him a C plus because, he focused a lot on immigration, on the crime and all the other societal dysfunction that has come because of the mass illegal immigration surge into the country over the last several years under the Biden-Harris administration. But I think that, he could have, like in many other subject areas, could have said more. I think that one of the things that he didn't talk about that, and he avoided really talking about was, exactly how he was going to, in practical terms, do a mass deportation if that's what he decides to do once he becomes president. And that's something that I think is of interest to people. I mean, they may support it in concept, but they would like to know exactly how that's going to work out in practical terms. And I think that if there is a next time, he needs to be able to talk about how that would work. So anyway, Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I would give Trump a C. This should be a major advantage for him, as every poll shows that voters by a mile trust him much more than Harris on the issue. But again, this is where lack of preparation comes in. He couldn't prosecute the case. When he frames it as we have millions and millions of people coming in from jails and mental health institutions, he just sounds crazy. And when you add to that the loony internet conspiracy about Haitians eating cats and dogs, that's just crazy talk. Harris, I would probably give her a C, largely because, again, she was kind of saved by the bell here. She talked about the bipartisan immigration bill that Trump really helped block. And that's a fair point. And he had nothing to say on that. Now, Lance is right. That bill wouldn't do much in the here and now, but that doesn't mean it isn't good policy on balance going forward. And of course, policy crafted largely by Republican legislators. But that's why preparing and having a debate strategy would have been helpful. You could have hit her on those issues and you could have asked those questions about the bill. And, as we mentioned earlier, that 3.5 years, what have you been doing about it for 3.5 years? Yes, this is for the future, but what about the past? But when you just kind of wing it, and you say a lot of wild stuff, well, you really let Harris get away with one on really what's her biggest policy weakness. We'll get back to our great guest in just a moment. But first, are you following PRI on Facebook? By following PRI at facebook.com/Pacific Research Institute, that's all one word, you'll be the first to read free market ideas from PRI's terrific team of scholars on all the hot issues like education freedom, single-payer healthcare, crime, homelessness, green mandates like the ban on natural gas appliances, and more. Plus, when you follow PRI at facebook.com/Pacific Research Institute, you'll be the first to know when tickets go on sale for PRI's must-attend luncheons, dinners, and galas across the state. And you'll be first in line to secure your spot to hear great speakers like Michael Schellenberger, Gordon Chang, Steve Hilton, and many more. So go to facebook.com/Pacific Research Institute and follow PRI today so you'll be the first to know.
So finally, who came across as a better leader for the next 4 years on the international stage, Trump or Harris? I think if you look at it from the perspective of outsiders, other countries, I would generally think that other countries prefer Harris, especially if you're from a liberal European country. Harris, if you're from Russia or China or Iran wouldn't even respect her and wouldn't listen to her because she could be snookered. But in the U.S.'s interest, it would certainly have to be Trump, despite his protectionist policies. We need to build back our decimated defenses, and I believe Trump, in his sort of unpredictable manner, is kind of an important trait on the international stage. If you can't predict how the leader of the free world will react, you stay at bay and not likely to try anything. Lance?
Yeah, I mean, I think that foreign policy is another really weak area for the Biden-Harris administration. They've got huge failures to account for during their 3.5 years in office. And so, I think Harris was lucky that it wasn't a major focus. That foreign policy wasn't a major focus of the debate. It did come up in a few questions, but certainly not, as a key issue in the debate. And so, but I do think that those failures are very real. And when you look at what happened in Afghanistan, and you look at what's the continuing failure in the Middle East, with the administration seeming to be totally helpless in order to do anything about the situation with the hostages and the situation in Gaza. I mean, there's a reason why Harris dodged the question on how to break the stalemate in Gaza, because they have no solution to that. And again, if they had one, they would have done so, within the last year, so that they would have gotten those hostages home. And so, I think that, really, if I were grading the candidates, I'd give Harris, either a D or a C. Trump, I think, again, he could have done better. But, simply because of his record, his support for the military, I think that I would give him a B on that. Tim, what do you think?
I'd give them both a C minus. I thought Harris was very strong rhetorically when she talked about Ukraine and in the frame of furthering U.S. values like freedom and democracy. Trump really whiffed when he wouldn't answer the question about whether he wants Ukraine to win the conflict. Now, on Afghanistan, she was at her worst in the whole debate when she tried to explain herself. I mean, that answer basically said that I 100% co-sign Biden's disastrous policy that killed 13 soldiers. That was really terrible and deserved more scrutiny in the debate. And Trump probably had his best sequence in the debate when talking about Afghanistan. But again, Harris got under his skin effectively here when she said the whole world's laughing at him. And what was his response? To use the words of Viktor Orban endorsing Trump as a world leader. That really isn't a point in your favor in a U.S. debate. I don't think most Americans are going to trust the words of an authoritarian. Trump really also couldn't articulate any foreign policy other than they wouldn't do that if I were president and I would get it solved very quickly. Well, how? I think actually foreign policy is very easy to prosecute when you're going against the Biden-Harris administration. We had peace and security while I was president, with the U.S. not involved in any major conflicts, and the world's burning today under Biden and Harris. And I think that the failure really to prosecute this well on what probably is his strongest issue, again, it goes back to Trump's failure to prepare for this debate.
So there was a lot of hullabaloo before the debate about the rules and whether the candidates' microphones should be muted while the other candidates were speaking. So now that we've watched the debate, do you think the rules particularly helped or hurt either of the candidates? And did the rules play a role at all at the outcome of the debate? Did the rules play a role at all in the outcome of the debate, in your view? And how do you grade the moderators from ABC News, David Muir and Lindsay Davis? Well, I thought that the moderators here will go down in history as some of the most biased moderators in any presidential debate. I thought it was an absolute travesty. Harris got a free pass on so many dodgy statements she made, while Trump was cornered every step of the way. I can't remember a single follow-up on any of her airy-fairy statements or even her stupid comments like the one about the troops. That said, Trump should have stepped up and called out Harris again and again, but instead he was on defense most of the night. I wonder if it would have made a big difference if she had been asked to follow up with by the moderators. She probably would have floundered. She probably would have had word salad. And I think it made a big difference. Instead, she used her canned statements that were rehearsed again and again and used her lawyerly skills to make these arguments. But in a situation where she would have been pressed on the questions, I think she would have floundered. How about you, Vance?
Yes, I agree with you, Ro. I mean, it's it was just very apparent from early on that the moderators were going to be very biased in this case. I mean, there's been a lot of talk, and rightfully so, about how they were fact checking Trump, but they never fact checked her, even though there were ample opportunities for them to do so, especially because she was using a lot of the canned, rehearsed lines she had used earlier speeches, and which, again, as I mentioned myself previously, have been disproven. So, I think that there was, real bias in the amount of fact checking in real time that went down there. I think, though, that one of the other things that really irritated me, just in terms of watching this as how a presidential debate should be moderated, is that there were some questions that the moderators actually served up to Harris really on a silver platter, where they put the ball on the tee for her and to say, take a great swing at it. One of the questions she that the moderators asked, they asked Harris if Trump is your opponent, Mr. Trump, suppressing the vote? Well, if that isn't like a question that comes right out of the Democratic National Committee, I don't know what is. I mean, that's fine if she wants to bring that up as as an attack against President Trump, but that's not the way that the moderators should be handling that issue. And even if it is a concern, that's not the way that it should be teed up for one of the candidates. So I thought that all in all, it was a very poor performance. I really give them an F. So, Tim, what do you think?
Well, I have a different view on it. We've obviously seen a lot of talk about how biased the moderators were, and it was 3 against 1. Well, what do you expect? Virtually every reporter is liberal and biased, and no one will surpass the horrific performance of Candy Crowley in the 2012 presidential debate, in my mind. But if you go down the list, I thought basically every question they asked of Donald Trump was a fair question and one that's to be expected in a debate. And I think it's ridiculous to think that they're just going to sit there when Trump says something loony or obviously false. I mean, that's their job to challenge him on it. Where you're right and where they failed was they didn't hold Kamala Harris to account in nearly the same way they did Trump. They did a little, but not nearly enough. And she should have been asked policy questions and scrutinized on all of her policies on the economy and foreign policy and immigration and so forth. But at the end of the day, it's not up to the moderators to do this, really. It's up to the candidate. And he didn't do it. And he didn't prosecute that case well. Remember, Donald Trump agreed to these rules. And he agreed to these moderators. If he didn't think ABC was going to run a fair debate, he shouldn't have agreed to it. Keep in mind, too, the moderators didn't make Trump not prepare for the debate. The moderators didn't make Trump repeat internet conspiracy theories. The moderators didn't make Trump ineffectively defend his record. The moderators didn't make Trump rehash old falsehoods about the 2020 election. If Trump wants to be mad at somebody, he should look in the mirror. We'll get back to our terrific interview in just a moment, but first, PRI's YouTube channel is must watch. By visiting youtube.com/PacificResearch1, that's the number 1, you can watch webinars, videos, and other original content, including our new Free City Center video tours and interviews. You can watch as PRI's Wayne Weingarten tours Dignity Moves, a San Francisco nonprofit that is reimagining scalable solutions to homelessness with founder and CEO Elizabeth Funk. And you can check out Stephen Greenhut's tour of a proposed new city in rural Solano County that has generated significant interest and intrigue. You can even listen to previous episodes of Next Round Podcast. So visit PRI's YouTube channel today at youtube.com/PacificResearch1, that's the number 1, and click the subscribe button to receive notifications about our latest content as soon as it's posted.
So let's move on to the polls. So if you believe the polls, it's an even race, especially in the battleground Midwest and the Sun Belt states that will decide who's going to be the next president. So which candidate do you think helped themselves the most with their performance with these key voters in the debate? I think it's made a tight race even tighter, frankly. Harris really helped herself by not looking like the lightweight, goofy, incompetent San Francisco elite that she is, which was her reputation the last 3.5 years. And I think this went a long way. This debate went a long way for swing voters who haven't quite made up their mind. On the other hand, Trump reminded these voters of all the craziness and chaos of his term and leaving them, quite frankly, exhausted.
So, I mean, all of us thought that Kamala Harris won the debate. So, I mean, I'm sure that it's going to help her in the polls. The question is how much and for how long. I think it's the same question that happened after the Democratic National Convention. She was helped. She did get a bounce, but that bounce was in the process, actually up to this debate of evaporating. And so, if she does get a bounce from this debate, will that bounce be solid and continue to the election, or will it also dissipate as well? The other question is how is she going to do among specific demographics? I mean, there was an NPR poll that I saw just prior to the debate that showed that there was a big shift towards Trump amongst independents and Hispanics. And, the question is, did this debate change those numbers? Because obviously those are hugely important demographics. And if they were trending Trump's way, just prior to the debate, will this stop that momentum that he had, and will it actually turn it around towards her? I mean, I think, again, it's time will have to tell. But I thought that was one interesting thing. I mean, I tried not to look at very much commentary afterwards so that we can come to this podcast with a mind's clear of outside influences. But I did see, a couple posters who were doing focus groups and also, just kind of immediate aftermath polling. And it seemed as though from what their comments, both their focus groups and their early polling data showed that there was not a whole lot of movement, amongst people. And so, is that going to be the case, 2 days, 3 days, a week from now, 2 weeks from now? I'm not sure, if that's what's going to happen in terms of whether this is her performance is going to build on itself, or is it just going to be a momentary blip? So, I think, again, we'll just have to wait and see. Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, you're right, Lance. We have 100 lifetimes between now and election day. And so, to think that, even a very strong debate performance like Harris had, is going to, mean the election's over. Well, no, that's not the case, but it certainly was very helpful. I think a lot of her strategy obviously was appealing to the 50 to 75,000 key voters in 3 or 4 states, many of whom are moderate Republican-leaning voters, Nikki Haley voters. They're going to decide the election. And, again, she could have done a better job with her policy answers in sealing the deal with more of these voters, but I think she certainly made them much more comfortable in casting a ballot for their ticket. You're right when we talk about independence. Yes, I think largely January 6th and things like that, the impact on the electorate is overblown. But I think one place where it is really kryptonite is with independent voters. And I think all of that talk, if he had been gaining back some of those voters, I think Trump really hurt himself with that. And he needs those voters in these states too to win. So I think she helped herself the most. And, I think Trump, again, it was a missed opportunity. He has a lot to offer these voters, both on his record and what he's proposed for a future administration. But he wasn't able to effectively communicate that because he didn't prepare and didn't have a strategy.
So let's look ahead to the vice presidential debate on October 1st between Senator Vance and Governor Walz. What are some of the things that you're looking forward to seeing in the matchup between the man who will be a heartbeat away from the presidency? Well, I would like to see J.D. Vance better articulate conservative and free market policies, which I think he can do. And I would like to see Governor Walz make a case for his and Harris's progressive policies so that swing voters could actually get a real sense of the direction that they want to take this country. The VPs of VP candidates have to step up to the plate because certainly their running mates fell down on the job. Lance.
Well, I think that this is a case where not having a huge record is actually helpful. Now, J.D. Vance has been in the Senate for a relatively brief amount of time, in a certain way, rather like Barack Obama. And so, he does have, some voting record in the Senate. He was a private citizen prior to that. I think that what hasn't really been fully discussed yet is the extent of Governor Walz's record, both as governor and as a member of Congress, but especially as a chief executive of a significant state in the country. And so I think that one of the things that I'd like to see discussed, and I'm sure that it'll come up during the debate, is some of the key issues that have gone on in Minnesota, for example, like the George Floyd riots, Minneapolis burning, Governor Walz's dithering in terms of sending in the National Guard. I think that he has Walz has tried to be the folksy Coach Waltz character that you might see on a sitcom, but there's a lot more far left record behind that image, and I think that J.D. Vance will probably focus on that. So, and I'm interested to see that once that becomes a focus in the debate, how Governor Walz then responds to that. How does he try to continue to appear to be a moderate while also defending his record, which is certainly not moderate. And I think that's going to be a really interesting, give and take between the two candidates. I think the other thing that I'm interested to see is, given the fact that obviously that both of them are veterans, and there's been controversy on Governor Walz's service, exactly how will J.D. Vance, as a Marine veteran who did serve in a combat area, how exactly is he going to handle the controversy over Governor Walz's military record? And so, I'm sure that will be a significant part of the debate as well. And, I think one needs to be nuanced in some of the criticism and not be ham-fisted, but I do think that there is a lot of room for examination when it comes to these issues. So, Tim, what do you think?
I agree with you both. I think this is going to be a real slugfest among policy nerds. I think it's going to be an energetic debate, and I think there's going to be something that was really missing from last night, a real discussion of policy issues. J.D. Vance is a real policy geek, and he's going to get down in the weeds on policy. There are going to be things for both sides to go after the other on. So I anticipate it's going to be a good, lively debate. I don't think we have a lightweight running mate in either ticket. So I don't think how the VP candidate fares is really going to matter a lot unless there's a major gaffe that happens. But I think it should be a good matchup.
Okay, as we close, the most important aspect of a debate is how the candidates fare in the polls afterward. Now that we've all had a bit of time to reflect on the debate, what do you think helped themselves the most, and we'll get the biggest jump after the polls, after this performance, Harris or Trump? I think Harris is going to get another bite of the apple. What about you, Lance?
Yeah, as I said, previously, I think that, Harris will probably get some bump. The question is how big a bump and how long lasting it will be. My personal opinion is that it is actually going to be, again, like the Democratic National Convention speech that she gave, where she did get a bump, but I don't think that it'll be long lasting. I think that their campaign still needs to do more in order to convince, the key swing voters that she is their candidate and that she is the person that they want as president. So I think they still have a lot to do. So it's going to be a lot of work for the next couple months for both sides. Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you both. Remember, if we don't have another presidential debate, really, last night was the last major event of the 2024 campaign. And there's not really going to be an opportunity for either to really alter the course of the campaign, other than, if there's some October surprise, some scandal that comes to light, or if they agree on a second debate. So I think the question about, how long would a potential bump last? Well, if there isn't really a major opportunity to change the course of the race, it might last longer than we think.
Okay, so here's a bonus question. Do you think there will be a second presidential debate between Harris and Trump after last night? Well, I think from Harris's standpoint, I wouldn't want another one if I were her. For Trump, I think I would. But from my own perspective, I hope not. Lance.
Now, I could be wrong, but I thought that I had heard some mumblings from the Harris side that they were interested in a second debate. If that's true, then to me, I have to ask, why would they want a second debate? If everybody is saying right now that they had won the first debate, why would they want a second one? And I wonder if it's because they think that, as I said, in my first response, that she won on points, she didn't knock him out. They still need to have another opportunity to make their case to the American people, and they need a second debate, and they don't think that he'll improve. And so therefore, they think that if they have a second debate, it would be their opportunity to maybe pound a nail in a coffin. On the other hand, I would also point out that, second debates are iffy for the people who think they won the first debate. Because if you look at how badly Ronald Reagan performed in his first debate against Walter Mondale in 1984, and then where he was over-prepared, over-programmed, couldn't get his views out, in a somewhat similar way to Donald Trump. But he did come back in the second debate and ended up basically cleaning Walter Mondale's clock and ended up, winning a 49-1 electoral landslide. So, it's one of those things where be careful what you wish for, and, you might not like the outcome. Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Certainly Harris has been strutting her stuff and calling for a second debate. And I think that's probably more mind games being played with Trump. Trump is now kind of backing off, his demands for a second debate. Actually, I don't think it's in either candidate's interest to have a second debate. There's a lot to lose for both of them. And, all the complaining about the muting of the microphone, I think it would be very difficult to find a moderator and a media host that both can agree on. So I wouldn't expect that we will see one.
From the entire All-Star Speechwriter panel, thank you very much for listening. If you like this episode, please tell your friends and subscribe to PRI's podcast at iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. And when you're on these platforms, don't forget to give us a big 5 stars. If you don't subscribe to any of these, you can still listen on PRI's YouTube page, youtube.com/Pacific Research 1. That's the number 1. Thanks for listening. I'm Rowena Itchon. Hope you'll come back again for next round with PRI.